If you want to be able to move well as you get older, then this episode is for you. Welcome back to Bend and Snatch. I'm Pennie. This is episode 10, and I spoke to James Fuller, aka Strongman Archaeology, about all things old school strongman. We were looking at some of the lessons that you can learn from these old school strongmen to bring into your training today to make sure that you can build a body that moves well, that's strong, that's flexible, and that you're having fun too. So enjoy. I'll see you on the other side. James, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Why don't you tell me why you love old school strongman training so much?
Because you have to be able to move as well as lift. That's basically it in a nutshell. You got to be able to move.
What do you think we've lost with modern strength training that we had in that old school strength training that doesn't have that same sort of movement value?
It's because of competition. Once it was about lifting more weight. I believe it's even more than the effect of steroids. If people today had to do weightlifting the way it was done 100 years ago, steroids or not, they wouldn't be lifting anywhere near as much weight. It was much harder to do a two-hand snatch. You had to do it with a arms parallel grip. So imagine how close your hands have to be to snatch with arms parallel to each other, right?
Gosh, that sounds hard.
Yeah. So that means you're going to use a split style because no one's going to squat that way. And back then, when you received the bar at the bottom of the snatch, you had to immediately come up. You're not allowed to steady yourself. It's a snatch. It's supposed to be, So we took away a lot of athleticism and a lot of movement. And that's the reason why things are more specific today, is because it's about lifting more weight, So let's shorten the range of motion. Let's allow people to put their hands as long as possible, right? So it's interesting how we've done these things all for lifting more weight or building more muscle mass.
Something that I find quite interesting within weightlifting spaces especially is because most people most of the time only focus on like being better at those very two specific lifts, so like the snatch and the clean and jerk. But a lot of them don't do any variety outside of that. From moving in just one way all of the time over and over again, you end up not having capacity to handle if something doesn't go right. So then if you do end up catching your snatch weird, you're just more likely to hurt yourself than if you were used to moving in different ways.
Yes. I had a good friend of mine. He would podium at the Nationals, drug-free in weightlifting. He could clean and jerk double his body weight. But when it came time to deadlift 500 pounds, as soon as his back would just start to round a little, his nervous system would shut down. In one sense, he was very proficient, but in another sense, his body would just shut down if he didn't do that exact precise path that grew.
I guess with competition, you focus so much on being good at the specific thing, so then you can get really, really good at that specific thing. But I think you end up losing a lot of other things. Like I know lots of weightlifters who aren't very good at deadlifting, and you'd think by the numbers that they can snatch and clean and jerk that they should be able to deadlift reasonable amounts.
Yes.
But I think it's that like flexion, not letting your spine, being afraid, I suppose, to let your spine flex in those positions just means you don't get to lift as much in other ways.
Yes. The old school weightlifters, when you weren't allowed to touch the bar on the way up of a snatch or a clean, so they had to do more mid-back and upper back pull versus the legs like they do today. So they could all deadlift a lot of weight. You had John Terry, who weighed about 60 kilos, and he could do about 275 kilo deadlift in the 1939.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So a lot of those guys could. John Davis, first guy to clean and jerk 400, he could deadlift 700 pounds. So it was different.
So with the old school weightlifting, no touching your hips on the way up, so you had to stay away from you.
Yes.
I guess that was on a bar that didn't spin as well.
No,
probably.
No, it was an Olympic bar. Yeah, it was
okay.
Those came out in 19. Well, they got popular in 1920 is when it really started to take off. Berg Hantel, or Casper Berg, actually, from Germany. They had what was called a world record weight set. I think it was called, at least the first popular Olympic sleeve, that rotating sleeve barbell. Others had done it beforehand, but that was the one that really took off. And by 1924, they were using it at the Olympics.
How did you get into old school strength training?
Well, I've been training over 40 years now. Part of it was the booklet that would come in your weight set 40 years ago, had all kinds of crazy old lifts in it. And if you didn't know better, you would do a hack lift and a deadlift and a Jefferson lift. So I've been doing those all the same amount of time. I'm just as familiar Jefferson lifting as I am hack lifting as I am deadlift. And then in 97, I saw an article, and it's about a famous strongman who's since passed away, George Olesen from Denmark. And you could deadlift 700 pounds with one finger, just his middle finger. And so the magazine's like, we're not going to tell you to do that, but we'll say, hey, try this with a dumbbell to kind of mimic it. And I remember how much it blew up my delts, like nothing else I'd ever done. My shoulders were firing like crazy. And I said, well, maybe it's time to start looking up other old stuff and see if it's, you don't know. We just trust the magazines at the time to say, no, we're past that. We don't need that anymore. Like, well, maybe you don't need that, but maybe I need it.
I love that you were able to find some in those old magazines. As time went on, strength sports split into lots of different directions. So then different sports would take the bits that they wanted. I guess for like bodybuilding, you do it one way.
Yes.
And then strongman and powerlifting and then weightlifting, they all became different things.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. It's funny when the bench press shirts came out, it was supposedly to protect the shoulder and keep the shoulder warm or whatever. No, it's about lifting more weight. When people talk about in powerlifting the monolift, so you don't have to walk the squat out, that it's for safety. And it also lets you lift more weight. So there's that too. Like, they always try to sell it on safety. And I'm like, but it lets you lift more weight. Do you think it might have something to do with that? Let's be honest, and walking out a heavy squat is a lot harder than not walking out a heavy squat. If all you got to do is pick it up and they remove the hooks and you just squat, that's a lot easier.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit about some squats. So before, I suppose a lot of the squatting from the floor came because we just didn't have squat racks yet. That's my guess of how we ended up here. Can you talk about some of the old ways people used to pick up their bars so that they could squat their big weights?
Arthur Saxon was not necessarily known for his squatting, but he was famous for hopping a bar up his back and then jerking it overhead. And he would do about 175 kilos while weighing 92 kilos or so. And
it's very impressive.
Yeah. And so when I started doing that, I didn't need good mornings anymore, because all that hopping the bar up your back, it's a lot of it is similar to what you do with a good morning. So they didn't need good mornings until we started having squat racks, because now you were taking away the good morning from putting the bar on your back. So it's just kind of created this extra steps that we already had in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've tried the hopping the bar up before, and I think the first thing you notice the first few times you do it is just how unpleasant it is. Like, you can really feel it on your spine on the way up. And I feel like the discomfort of a lot of the old lifts is probably part of why we invented so many other ways of doing things, just so you didn't have to get into that discomfort too much.
Well, in the States, I know we came up with the squat stand for the Olympic team, and just to help them save energy. So instead of doing a Steinborn lift where you pick up one end of the bar and rock it over you, our coach, Mark Berry, who's written some great books on training, like Physical Training Simplified, he's like, hey, let's save energy. Let's have it already setting up here on some stands, and you guys can just pick it up and squat it. But it was never about safety, Again, it's about lifting more weight, not about safety.
I've seen a video of you before doing a Steinborn lift, maybe with 60 kilos on the bar, and you picked it up and you shouldered it, and then you slid into a front split, and then you stood back up. And I think it's one of the coolest things I have ever seen in my whole entire life. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
I think that was to shut up a friend of mine who was saying that I wasn't very flexible. And I said, well, I guess I can show you what this lifter did. Harold Ansforge would do it with 300 pounds, so I just put 45s on the bar, went down into a split and came back up just to shut him up, But I've always liked movement. I like being strong, but I like being able to move better. So I make sure I can do splits, side splits, all that stuff. I've done a Van Dam lift where I'm in a side split on 2 benches and I pick up a 70, not quite a 70 kilo dumbbell, 150 pounds, so like 68 kilos roughly.
So cool.
Thanks. Well, I've trained for it. I've always trained for it.
Do you think you could still do it now?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
I've been training my middle split for the last 2 years, almost entirely with the sole aim of being able to do a Van Damme split at some point. Do you have any tips or advice on how I can manage it?
Did you see yesterday's post for the power pulls by any chance? So those are
I'll
like,
have to have a look.
yeah, it's like a sumo stance high pull. So a high pull is
Oh,
from
yeah,
Olympic
okay.
lifting, but this is a sumo stance high pull, and that built a lot of my mobility for side splits. I never practiced side splits because between those and side lunges, you're going to build all the groin mobility you need to do side splits.
So you don't actually practice the splits, you just did these wide stance lifts?
For the side splits, yes, and for regular splits, I usually have people do that split ham or the heel push, where you have either the dumbbell in each hand or a bar in the back, and you have one leg with the heel up on a platform or on a dumbbell rack, and you lean forward and don't pull up. You push your heel into whatever it's resting upon, and that pushing into that builds up that hamstring strength, stretches out the back of the knee, and it helps you get into splits pretty quick.
Okay, that's cool. I'll have to try both of those things.
Yeah, I can send you a link to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. When we're talking about like old school strongman, what period of time does that refer to?
I would say before weightlifting got popular. So I would say roughly pre-World War II. Because once the Cold War came around and all the communist countries set up all their satellite countries, the communist bloc, and they wanted to show the superiority, and one way to show your strength is through a strength sport. So weightlifting, of course, is the de facto choice. And so anything pre-World War II is going to involve a lot of old-time strongman. Definitely pre-World War I is when you're still seeing a lot of the vaudeville type strongman traveling with the circus.
Do you have any favorite circus strongmen?
Probably Arthur Saxon and his brothers, who are known as the Saxon Trio, mainly because they put up, I think it was 1,000 pounds reward to anyone that could come on stage with a scale and say that their weights didn't weigh as much as claimed. And so somebody would show up with weights, a newspaper, somebody like a what's it called? A National Enquirer over here. I don't know what it would be over there, but it would be a tabloid type of newspaper that somebody would show up with scales to catch you in the act of lying on stage. And theirs always weighed more than what they claimed, So if it was a 300-pound barbell, he was bent pressing, it was actually like 312. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so I respect what they did as far as actual lifting, but I also respected the fact they weren't scared of a challenge or to prove they could do what they could do.
Challenge element was a common part of a lot of the circus strongmen, right? So they'd be like, hey, if you can outlift me,
yes,
then come and show yourself. And people from the audience would come and try, and they very rarely could because they weren't actually as strong as these people who spent their whole lives lifting things.
Well, and like weightlifting, they all had their pet lifts, They had certain things there was really no standard weight sets then. So if you had a barbell, it was one you had made. There was no standardization. That's another interesting thing is if I come over to see you and we go compete in a weightlifting meet, you and I will be lifting on the same weight set. And it will be similar enough to the one I have here. But if you went and challenged another strong man, or another strong woman, you all had your own barbell with its own quirks and idiosyncrasies. So that's challenging, Imagine if I had a weight set completely different from yours, That's a little scarier. It's a little less sure that you're going to be able to perform.
I guess having things of different widths makes a massive difference in whether or not you're going to be able to pick it up, especially if you've got small hands. I guess the bigger you are, the easier it's going to be to adjust to whatever the kit available is.
That's why I like competing in strongman, is because it was just all this weird, wacky stuff that you really didn't know how much it weighed. Like, how much is the car deadlift? Well, it doesn't matter because we all have to do it. So who cares how much it weighs? Either you can pick it up or you can't.
How much does modern day strongman differ from those old school strongman practices?
I would say in spirit, they're identical, but in practice, there is about as different as night and day. It's very interesting. Uh, Back then, the old time strongmen were average size, average height people. You know, you didn't see anyone really 6 feet tall. You may here and there, but that was unusual. Whereas today at the top level, you're seeing what, 6.5 feet is the average. You know, um, and there's a lot more supportive equipment now. The knee sleeves, the belts, the wrist wraps, straps, and all that. I haven't really read much about lifters using straps before World War II. I'm not saying it didn't exist. I just haven't seen anyone really using them or talking about them. And the only people really using straps was post World War II would be people who competed in the Olympics, and they would just make their own.
Talking of small lifters, this feels like a really great time to share a story of probably one of my favorite stories of old school strongmen. I'm sure you already know it. Feel free to add some extra context, but I feel like the audience might enjoy this. So there was this guy called Maxick. I actually have his book here if anyone's watching this book. And I think it's really interesting because he was like this little sickly guy and he wasn't allowed to do too many things. So he ended up teaching himself how to be strong from just looking at himself in the mirror and like contracting his muscles. And he learned that he could build muscle that way. And he ended up, once he was grown and he was allowed to do things, going out and teaching other strong men how to contract their muscles to get big. And he would like watch fighters and stuff and figure out how to do it. And he taught Harry Houdini this trick of like muscle contracting. So then when Harry Houdini was doing his tricks where people would like tie his wrists, he'd like make his wrists really, really big. And then they tie him up really, really tight. And then he would relax and be able to pull his hand through. And it would look like magic. And it would seem like magic, but it was strength training. And he did the same thing with like swallowing a key and being locked in a box. And then he would contract the muscles around his esophagus to push the key back up so he could unlock himself. And again, it would look like magic, but it was strength training. And I just think that's so cool. That's my favorite story.
Maxick is one of my favorites. If people, because a lot of people doubt, they look at the lifts that the old time strongman did, and they're like, "There's no way those guys were bench pressing 300 pounds. There's no way they were lifting 300 pounds overhead with one hand." I'm like, well, over 24 different men have done it over varying eras. So did they all lie? I mean, that's quite a stunt if all 24 plus guys lied. Like, you think some of them at least did it, So I think one of the greatest secrets of strongman is muscle control. I think that is that nervous contraction, mastery of the nervous system. I use it. I was actually doing muscle control before I started training. Back as a kid, I would do muscle control, because as kids, I think you're fascinated with your bodies. And you would be like, hey, I can make my muscle do this. Can you do that? And so you challenge each other. And because it's just curious back then, you know? And so I think muscle control is one of the great secrets of being very strong. Like, what is the point of lifting weight if it doesn't help you make a better mind to muscle connection, right? So, like when I'm training people that are like, I'll train people for strongman in the past, current strongman. And I'll say, well, if you can't fix that elbow, pull the elbow in on that press, we're going to have to lighten the weight. Because if you don't have the ability to control it, then you're just flying blind. You'll have to be able to control where that elbow is, or else you're going to get hurt. And really, even if I let you go on, you're not learning anything. You may be lifting the weight, but you have no idea what you're doing. And that's muscle control. And I think it's interesting because it's something you can do. I would do it while I'm driving as a delivery driver for hours. You can do it standing in line. You can do it while I'm sitting here talking to you. I can do it with my calves or with my neck or whatever. So the better you can control yourself, literally, the better lifter you're going to be. He was still the only person I know that could one hand jerk double his body weight.
That's crazy.
I mean,
So strong.
just body weight would be impressive, but double body weight one hand jerk.
It is very impressive.
Yeah.
For the people listening, can you explain to them what doing it entails? Like, what is muscle control? How do you do it? How do you get better at it?
Well, I find the best way is I'll contract the muscle until it starts to cramp. So I'm not saying you got to go crazy and make it cramp as badly as you can, or as violently or viciously as you can, but get it to cramp some so you get a better feel of, oh, okay, this is how I make this, and get in the habit. And it's like practicing a golf swing, practicing a stroke in swimming. It's through practice you'll get better and better at making things contract, until it becomes automatic, which is why. And so, like this morning, I did hub curls. I hubbed a 45-pound, a 20.45 kilo plate 6 times cold. I don't need to warm up as much as other people do because I'm already connected. Do you know what I mean? Because of that muscle control. I think the warm up in many cases is more of a mental warm up. And the better you're able to practice muscle control and master that. Like I will curl. So Juji came to my house, Juji Mufu, and he filmed a show at my house. And I was showing him something with a barbell with 60 some odd kilos on it. And I just started curling it cold, and it freaked him out. He goes, wait a minute, you can't do that. I'm like, yeah, why not? Who says you can't? Because if here in Maine, if you fall and slip on the ice in the wintertime, it's not like you have a couple of minutes to go stretch your hamstrings, go put on a belt. So wouldn't you want to be ready at all times? And I think practicing muscle control can help you be ready at all times and make you really strong.
I love that. Because in real life, you don't have time for warming up. You need to have a decent baseline of all the things that you can do and the things that you can handle. I think that's something that I really love about flexibility training. Because if you're doing like that strength work in those end ranges, you have no choice but to actually really focus on what you're doing, to contract your muscles, to make them move. Because you can't do it otherwise. It's not possible. You can't like fling yourself around. You're either doing it good with full attention or you're just doing something else. It's a really, really useful thing to learn because most of the time, most people aren't that connected to their bodies and don't really understand where they are in space or how to make them do things.
They're body blind.
And it makes like real life harder because you're like just going through the world a bit blindly and clumsily and more likely to get hurt. But it makes training loads harder too. It makes progress loads harder as well. Because you're just not, you could be trying really hard, but if you're not actually making your muscles do stuff, you end up just compensating in other ways, and it takes you a lot longer to get better at anything.
You're 100% right. You need 100 kilos of strength to lift 85 kilos. Whereas if you had a better understanding of what you were contracting, you would lift 100 kilos. You would maximize your potentials, And that's hard working with clients that have been injured who aren't athletes or who don't exercise. Is that body blindness? It's not enough to fix what is injured. There's no point in fixing what is injured if you also don't help them understand their bodies better, because it's just going to happen again. You know what I mean?
How do you help people learn their bodies better?
So anything that's a corrective lift, I try to stay away from isolation work, and I try to make it as full body as possible. Because isolation work is great for an athlete, for someone who's highly coordinated, because I can give them anything and they can integrate it easily into whatever it is they're going to do. But with a non-athlete, I want the corrective work to be as close to some full body movement so that it's easier to integrate in their life. And it's forcing them to be aware of their body as a whole as they correct the issue. So if I can make it happen in 3 joint movements instead of a single joint movement, I'm always going to go for the multiple joint movement. Let's create body awareness. You could call it athleticism because then on some level it is more athletic, whatever you want to call it. But it's definitely about getting them to realize there's something you can control here. It isn't just some random reason why you get injured. It's your body telling you need to pay attention.
So then if we can be a bit more specific, what might that look like if, I don't know, say someone keeps hurting their back? What could something be that they could do to learn how to make their backs back better?
Well, I would do the first part of the Arthur lift. I would take a broomstick and tell them pick up the broomstick and hop it up the back. It doesn't need to be a lot of weight. It's more at first. At some point, you'll want to use more weight, but at first, I say use a broomstick and teach yourself how to move that broomstick up your back. It's going to make you stronger because you don't do anything. So anything's going to make you stronger. And it's going to give you this awareness of things behind your body. And, oh, that's my back. I can feel that. Oh, okay. And it's going to give you confidence. So when I train people, because I don't want my clients using power racks, squat stands, uprights on a bench. I figure they have to earn the weight they get to use. So they don't like it at first. But after a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, they feel empowered because they realize I don't need that stuff. I just need a barbell and some plates, a couple of dumbbells. I can do anything. And it's like, yeah, you can. You don't need all this stuff. If you like going to the gym, that's fine. But don't think you need it. You don't. Because
I love that.
What is the most that I need to get somebody to squat? Do I need somebody to squat 600 pounds? No. Do I need someone to squat 400 pounds? No. Most people aren't going to need to squat 300 pounds, right? To have a productive, healthy life. We're talking regular people, not athletes.
Whenever I'm introducing clients to some like old school ways of doing things, they always at first think it's really weird. And they're like, why are we doing this? This is so strange. But then as soon as they've learned how to do it, for the most part, everyone always loves it because it's fun. And you feel like you've really achieved something. Like if you can figure out how to like shoulder a barbell from the floor and then either press it or squat it or whatever, it gives you this sense of like, oh, okay, I'm actually really strong. I can actually do stuff. Because if you watch someone doing a Steinborn squat, you're like, oh, my back could never. But then you do it and you're like, oh no, my back could actually. My back can do all sorts of things.
Yeah. You can actually, I worked in the woods as a kid. I actually did work in the woods this weekend with a couple of 100-foot pine trees that got dropped. But you can shoulder a log that's way heavier than you can squat. You can shoulder way more weight onto your shoulders. So, because people are like, well, that's Steinborn, but you'll never reach your limit squat that way. I'm like, yeah, you can. You can shoulder way more. I can shoulder at least 100 pounds more than I can squat. So it's just an excuse. If you don't want to do something, just say you don't want to do it. But don't say it's not productive. It's very productive. If you were a footballer or a rugby player, wouldn't it be great to be able to pick up 150 kilos whenever you want off the ground, shrug it onto your shoulder? How would that not help an athlete who needs more core strength?
Yeah, and being able to shoulder stuff, as well as being useful in terms of, like, if you're an athlete, I think it's useful in real life. Like, it's cool as hell, but it's also useful in real life. Because in real life, if I'm going to carry something, like if I'm taking a big bag of, like, I don't know, soil to my garden, I'm going to put it on one shoulder because that's the strongest place to walk with it, where I can still also see where I'm going and see where the floor is.
Yes.
That's a useful skill to be able to like pick something up and put it here.
Yes.
And I don't think most modern training practices really have any of that. And if you do, like if you see anyone, I guess, I don't know, doing carries with front racks, maybe like marching with a front rack, it's never usually that heavy. It's usually done as like an afterthought. They're like, oh, abs. And then they'll do it. But no one's like, oh, I wonder how heavy I can do this. I guess unless they're a strongman, where they're carrying awkward things all the time.
Right.
And it feels useful. Yes. It feels like a useful thing to be able to do.
Yes. Well, and it's rewarding when you get a client after some point in time, they'll realize that they could do something at home or at work they haven't been able to do in years. And they're like, "Is that because of the stuff we're doing?" And I'm like, "Yes, yes." And they're like, "Okay." And all of a sudden, compliance is no longer an issue. Now you can't hold them back. They're like, "Oh, so this is what getting stronger and moving better is?" I said, "Yes." Because to them, it's like explaining a color they can't see until something in life calls upon them to need that strength and movement. And then they're like, got it.
That's one of my favorite things as a coach as well. When someone comes in and they're like, oh, I was able to carry my suitcase up this whole flight of stairs and this man offered to help me, but I was like, I'm actually fine. I'm like, yes, you're fine.
Yes, you are.
Because you're strong.
Yes.
And that's really nice.
Yes.
Being able to do things where people are like, oh, let me help you. And you're like, I actually don't need any help.
But I'll let
I'm
you know.
actually fine.
Let
And
you
it's
know.
nice. It's really nice for people to discover
Yes.
their strength and to realize that they can do anything. And I think strength training in general, I think, can do that for you.
Yes.
But including some of these old school lifts, some of the things that look a bit weird, they can be really powerful tools for building a body that can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think the
Um,
muscle control is big from Maxick because you can do it anywhere. And just lifting from different angles. You know?
One of the lifts that I see you do a lot that I'll get my clients to do sometimes if we want to work on their shoulders is like doing a pullover and then doing your press instead of just pressing out of the rack. Can we talk a bit about that?
It's for safety reasons. If I have someone pull over the weight first, they're never going to load up too much weight because they got to pull it over first. So it's like the Steinborn lift. I always have to get on people to add more weight because they're just intimidated by it, which is good. And so when you have these lifts like the pullover and press where you can't put on too much weight, well, then you should be, if you're supposed to get 8 reps, you should be getting 8 reps because you're using an appropriate weight. And you should be getting a full range of motion because you're using an appropriate weight. So it's like a governor. It's like me being there without being, because there's no way for them to pick up too much weight. And so it makes sure the shoulders stay open. You're not going to have any rotator cuff issues because you're reaching back and grabbing the bar and pressing. That's a lot of range of motion in that shoulder joint. And if anything happens, what do? You put it back down. There's no uprights in the way. There's nothing in the way. There's no standards, nothing. So it allows you to push in some respects harder because all you got to do is put it back down. You can just drop it behind you there. So I think it's empowering because at first they're intimidated by not having the uprights there, and they don't realize the uprights are actually holding you back. You know, so it keeps you in an appropriate range of motion and with weight. But I think it also empowers you because it gives you a way to ditch it if you need to. Because even there's people that have been injured even with spotters because the spotters didn't know what they were doing. You know, you don't spot people with your hands in your pockets. That's not a good idea.
You're always training in your garden, right?
Well, my shed and my driveway.
How do you get yourself to still do that when it's like raining or snowing or windy?
Well, now see, when it's snowing, it's easy that time of year because that's when the air is really cold and it's full of oxygen. And so it's really clean air. There's no pollen, there's no bugs. It's the best time to train outdoors is actually in the winter. It sounds weird, but the air is so thick with oxygen and your recovery is so much faster. So that's easy. It's harder in the summer when it's so humid. That's when it's hard. So you got to do it earlier in the morning and try to get it done earlier in the day, you know. But you just get used to it. And now more so than ever. Like I trained at the gym yesterday, and I was annoyed much of the time I was there because people are talking instead of training, and they're talking over you, through you as you're trying to train, and then people, I can't believe, like I use my phone at the gym to record, and that's it. Whereas everyone else is on their phone, and I had to ask someone, hey, can I get on that pull-up bar? And they were annoyed with me. They've been texting on their phone because the pull-up bar is part of the cable crossover section. And they were annoyed with me. And I'm like, well, you're standing there for 3 minutes and I'd like to do some pull-ups, you know? So the gyms are different than when I started. The etiquette is gone. Um, and so it makes it easier for me to train at home. You know, if people want to talk, go get your workout done and then go to the juice bar.
What does a typical training week look like for you?
If I have competition coming in weightlifting, then I'll be training probably 5 days a week, maybe more, because then I also have a lot of grip stuff I like to do. So I might train 6 days a week, depends on what I'm doing. So it can vary from 3 days a week when I'm just on a maintenance to 5 or 6 days a week. And sometimes I don't know. I was with someone for a while and we were at a dinner party and somebody else asked me about my training and I said, "Oh, I might get outdoors 4 days a week." And my partner corrected me and said, "You're out there 6 nights a week." Really? I mean, I was off by 50%. I couldn't believe it. He said, "Really?" They're like, "You are out there 6 nights a week. You are out there." Wow. So I love it. So when you love something, you don't keep track. Like if you love someone, you don't keep track of all the nice things you did for them and how many they did back to you, right? You love them. You want to do nice stuff for the person before. So it's interesting with training because people say, well, there's no way you can train as much as you do without drugs. And it's like, well, if you love it, you'll find a reason to do it, right? So if you want to train 3 days a week or 4 days a week or 6 days a week, you'll figure it out, right?
Where can people start with some old school strongman practices in their own training?
Well, I would get back Maxick's book on muscle control. I think that's a great one. I think it's published in 1914 is the one I had. I think you might have a different one than I do.
Yeah, there are two. I've got this one.
Yeah, I've got the other one. Either one of Maxick's, anything by Maxick's is a good start because I think muscle control is a great way to start. Because if you learn muscle control and then you take that attitude of trying to feel what's going on and you take that with the weights when you start, I think you'll be much further ahead than just about everybody, you know. Yeah, Maxick's is good. You can look up online by George Hackenschmidt, The Way to Live. I think that's 1905, 1908. He was a wrestler, a weightlifter, and a philosopher. He's a pretty interesting person. But those are two, Maxick's and Hackenschmidt, two very good places to start.
What do you think are some lessons from old school strength culture that people can bring into modern training to make it more meaningful?
Stay away from machines if you can. Learning to have your body support you while you do something is a lot of what we do. If there's a chance to make something have more movement, I would always go towards that. Uh, More weight is more weight, but that doesn't mean automatically better. It just means more weight. If you need to be able to lift more weight because of your job, because of your lifestyle, fine. But you have to be careful because you can't sacrifice your movement for more weight. That's never a good idea. Everything's got to give and take, right? Like we were talking with weightlifters, it's great that they can put so much weight overhead, but what have they had to give up to be able to do that as far as being able to move outside that groove? So I would say keep the movement. If there's a earlier version of a lift that has more movement, but you can't lift as much weight, I would go with that.
What are you training for at the moment?
I've got some goals that I need to scratch off the list because of my age. I want to get it done. And you just don't know how.
How old are you?
I turned 54 today, actually. Today I turned 54.
Oh, no way. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So there's some lifts I want to get done. I'm still gaining strength. It's more, what am I motivated to do? It's funny how things change. You think, oh, I'm always going to want to do this. When you're 20 and 30, you think, oh, I'm always going to want to do that. Then you kind of get to the point that you've kind of proved yourself on certain things and you don't care anymore. Yeah. So, which is,
What are the lifts that you want to tick off?
oh, I'd like to pinch grip a pair of old York deep dish 45s. It's like 4 inches thick. So it'd be about 90 pounds or 41 kilos. It's very hard. It's considered one of the top grip feats to do for pinch gripping.
That's cool.
I'd like to Steinborn 500 pounds or 227.5 kilos. I think that would be cool. And
That would be cool.
yeah, I'd like to get the Arthur lift back up. I had it up to 141 kilos. Like to get it somewhere 150-ish. I think would be cool. You know, it's funny. You didn't ask this, but if you don't mind me saying, it's funny. I'm 54, and it really isn't all the stuff they told me about getting older. It isn't about getting older. It's more about I just don't move like I did in my 20s. Like it was common for me to go play hacky sack for 2 hours, 3 times a week. I would go throw the frisbee around 1 hour once or twice a week on top of my training. And I don't have a bunch of friends that do that anymore. So I don't do that anymore. But if you think about all the running around you did in your 20s, if we did that in our 50s or even half that, we'd be in so much better shape that we wouldn't. It's not so much aging, it's just you're not moving as much. There's not as much activity in your life as there used to be. Yes.
Do you think there's a way you could add some of that running around back into your life?
Well, I'm thinking of joining a martial arts or some type of martial arts because that'll make me move more and do it in a group. And then there's an expectation that you'll test for a belt. So to me, that makes sense. I'm not against CrossFit, and I've done a lot of training CrossFit gyms for weightlifting, but it, I'm always leery of clicky things. And I know martial arts groups can be clicky too, but it always gets a little weird for me when things get a little too clicky. Because then if you don't do what the group does, there's friction. And I'm not big on friction. I like, hey, you do what you want to do. I do what I want to do. And if you need help, I'll help you out. Even if it's something I don't do, I'll help. But I'm always leery of that, if that makes any sense. But
Martial
It's
arts are a nice idea.
yeah, I think grappling would be fun. Um, I'd be able to use some of my mobility. I like doing neck bridges. Those have been a big help for a lot of my older clients is neck bridges. I had a woman in her mid 60s and I had her doing neck bridges. And I know probably people thought I was insane, but she came back in 2 weeks. Shoulder problems gone. She even breathes better at night when she's sleeping because, things are where they're supposed to be, or so her chest is open.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You got to do neck bridges on the first session.
The first session, if they're game, it kind of
Gosh,
it's
that's
something.
cool.
It's more a mental thing than anything. I mean, your body's meant to protect you, and so there's plenty. And what are you going to do? Fall on the ground? I mean, you're not. It's like when I want to train someone for jumps, I haven't do kneeling jumps on the floor. You're already on the floor. How far can you fall? Right. So yeah, neck bridges
That's
first
cool.
session if they're game, because that's part of it. If you're doesn't matter what you do. If you're worried that you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. But if someone's like, "Yeah, I'll try that out," great. Who am I to say? Love that attitude. If you're willing
Yeah,
to,
that's awesome.
yeah. So I don't make people do it on the first session, but if they're game, they're like, "Yeah, I'd try that." Okay, great. And I don't make a big
It's
deal
cool.
about it, right? You don't want to say make too much of a deal. Just go, "Oh, great, great, yeah, let's do that." Yeah. They're either going to do it or they're not.
I saw a study this morning that said they looked at strength athletes in their 70s compared to like recreational gym goers in their 20s. And the strength athletes in their 70s were actually a bit stronger than the recreational lifters in their 20s. And that is incredible because you know that if you keep lifting, you can stay strong. But knowing that if you keep lifting, like really intentionally, you can actually stay stronger than 20-year-olds. That's mad.
Mm.
And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Because imagine being 75 and being stronger than the 20-year-olds.
My
I really hope that I get to live that.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, it's funny how things have changed so much from when I started, and there's so much ignorance about it, and there's still a lot of ignorance today. Back then, it was from lack of information, and today it's from too much information, but it's still just ignorance. And I remember people like, oh boy, you're going to get in your 20s and you're going to have arthritis. And I got there, I'm like, well, I'm here. And they're like, well, when you're in your 30s and you're in your 40s, okay, I'm in my 40s, no joint pain yet. Well, when you're in your 50s, I'm like, okay, I'm in my 50s, I don't have any joint pain yet, you know. So I've told people before I could get arthritis in my hips or my knees tomorrow, and I'll be happy because I'm still have been moving better and stronger than people half my age. You know, I'll take it, but I don't think I'm going to have any
Just
problems. You know,
you just got to keep doing the things for as long as your body lets you, I guess.
yeah, don't. So like, not using a power rack and making and having to pull over the weight for the press. Your overall weight's going to be lighter than someone who just only benches. So your joints are going to get used out faster than someone who does a lot of pullover and presses because you're staying in a more appropriate range. You're using more range of motion. So the shoulder joint's going to be healthier for a much longer period of time. You know, I'm working with someone that's had 2 partial knee replacements and they're now lifting more at 58 and better and feeling better about it than they did in their 20s in college. And they're not chasing strength, but they feel better. And as they get stronger, they feel better. So once they feel better, they get stronger, they feel better. And it's just this feedback loop of positivity. So they keep telling me they don't care how much weight they lift, but they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger because it makes them feel better and better and better. So their knees are better than ever because they were not lifting right for 30 years, which is why they needed partial knee replacements, you know? So it's interesting. It's very interesting, you know?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
You said you're still getting stronger. So are there things that you're still better at now than you were when you're in your 20s and 30s?
Better at?
Like,
Well,
stronger, I guess.
yeah, it's if I put my mind to it, I can if I had a motivation, if someone's like, I'll give you £250,000 if you go and Steinborn lift 500 pounds within 6 months, I would do it. You know what I mean? Which would be more than I've ever Steinborn, even at 54 years old. I know my grip is definitely stronger than it's ever been. And I would say my core strength right now is ridiculously strong. I can't even explain to you how strong my core is right now. Like it made all the other stuff seem like child's play. I've been doing manual labor to help my father out. And I'm moving trees and I'm shoveling all this earth, filling up a wheelbarrow. It's like nothing. It's so easy. My core is so strong right now. And it's from all the one hand overhead lifting. So the bent presses, the overhead deadlifts, the side presses, and so on. The one hand overhead squats. I can't even explain to you how it's really weird, and I wish people could feel this kind of core strength for like 5 minutes because you'll never go back. You know what I mean? It just and I think about it, all those years in powerlifting, strongman, I didn't wear a belt either. So I have been core centric with everything I've ever done in lifting, right? The only time I wear a weight belt is if I'm doing a hip lift because the hip belt would go over the weightlifting belt and I'm doing upwards of a ton. And that's a lot of pressure on the bursa sacks that are underneath your IT band. And I didn't wear a belt. And so it was just the hip belt and it wound up inflaming my bursas that they were like golf balls on each hip. And you'd imagine how much that pushed against the IT band. Never go through that again. Learn my lesson. Put on a weight belt and then the hip belt. But anyways, if you could feel for a few minutes how good the heavy one hand get ups, all that stuff, because they say you can't if you want to fully transmit the power from the legs to the upper body. If you got a weak core, you're going to lose a lot of that power, and they're right. But it's amazing right now how strong my core is. That I would say is leagues beyond what I've ever had before, even after competing in all those sports. And you'd think, oh, he'd be fine. It's not that I was hurting, but you just you don't know what you don't know until you realize and you get educated.
Do you think if people incorporate some like one arm overhead lifts once a week, into
Sure.
their training, that would be enough.
Wow, it could help. I don't know. Enough is kind of nebulous, right? It's what do they need to do? Um, but if you wanted to say warm up with on your squat warm ups, you're like, I'm going to do a one hand overhead squat for the first 2 or 3 sets, and add a little more weight each set. And as your squat gets stronger, let that warm up get stronger. So I think that would be a good idea, a simple way of incorporating it. I'm not. Everyone thinks I'm saying you have to throw out everything you're doing. I'm like, no, but there's things you can add to your warm up that you can then go into your regular training. I think that can help.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. Because if you're warming up for your squats anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, why not? Why not
you
do
pro-
some one hand overhead squats as a warm up? You know,
yeah, that sounds fun.
get up to 50%. Like if you're going to be doing 100 kilos on your squats today for whatever reps, I don't care. But if you work up to 50 kilos, work up to half of your work weight on your with the one hand overhead squats. Why not?
I mean,
Not right away,
it's
but as an
yeah, I'm
eventual
just
goal.
imagining how much I can one arm overhead squat. And if I could one arm overhead squat 50% of my back squat, that would be amazing.
How much is your
So
back squat?
far, 78 kilos.
78.
I think the
So
most I've one arm squatted is like 22 kilos.
what's how do you get the weight overhead?
I usually will do like a power snatch.
Okay. So if you had a stronger way of getting it overhead, do you think that would help?
What, like maybe pressing it up?
I don't know if you've ever seen, but I will do a two-hand muscle snatch,
Okay.
or if it's really heavy, I'll do a two-hand clean, hand-to-hand clean, and push press it overhead, shift it into one hand, the barbell, right? And that's a much stronger way of getting a weight overhead. And that's the Saxons would do. Saxon would clean and jerk a 275. It's at 125 kilo barbell, shift it into one hand, reach down and grab a 67 kilo barbell, shift it up with one hand onto his shoulder, rock it over, and pop that overhead. And it was like 180, 190 kilos total overhead.
Crazy.
So,
That's so cool.
and Maxick's in the book I have. I don't know if it's in yours, but I know it's in the one I have. Maxick shows how to lift a bar overhead with two hands and shift it into one. He's got pictures showing that.
Okay.
So,
That's cool.
because the reason why I address this is because I find that the hardest thing is how do I get the damn weight overhead into one hand?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That's
Yeah.
something to play around with. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll give that a go.
I mean, my best one hand snatch is like a 75 kilos, roughly 72 kilos. But I can definitely get much more if I use two hands on it.
Gosh, but you can one hand squat more than 70 kilos.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
That's crazy.
Mhm.
That's so impressive.
And it's
What's your best back squat?
my best Steinborn is full 195 kilos.
So strong. That's so cool.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. I think the one hand squats are more than just a one hand squat because my goal is to get turned around and to have the free elbow come down between the legs when I squat. So you want to be rotated and then squat in that rotated position. And you switch each set, of course, which hand is overhead, but you want that free elbow to come down between your knees and squat that way. And I tell you, it builds a lot of mobility and it builds a lot of stability because we're always worried about stacking our spine front to back, so to speak. But we don't realize that all those rotational muscles, how much they can stack the spine. So if you try to reach up for something and you turn and reach, you can reach higher than if you just stay straight. So there's all kinds of extension going on with that twisting. And it's very interesting. And I think it's a blind spot in strength training is that balancing out that left to right rotation of the spine, the torso. And I think it can pay big dividends later on. It may, I try not, the stuff I do, I try not to sell it too much to people in their 20s and 30s because they move great. There's really no incentive for them to listen to the old guy. But as people get older and they don't move so well, it's like, okay, let's check, let's balance out some of these unchecked motor patterns. Let's balance out your left to right rotation, your left to right bending of the spine. That right there solves a lot of problems.
Working on those rotations and being able to like flex and twist your spine can make a lot of other things much easier. And I think it's a thing most people can't do very well, unless they're athletes, I guess, already. But like even just 20, 30-year-olds who are normal Gen Pop people who haven't done much exercise before, that's already a thing that they can't do.
Yep.
And working on it is valuable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So if you say, okay, I'm going to show you how to do one hand overhead squats, and they'll be the part of the warm up to your regular squats, fine. I think that can take care of a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice idea.
I would like everyone to bench press, but I understand not everyone's going to want to bench press, and that's okay. I think the bench press is probably the single greatest lift anybody can do because it builds the bending and rotating strength of the spine. And because you're holding a heavy weight overhead, it's building all kinds of rotator cuff strength.
Bench press is also teaching you that muscle control, right? Because you have to.
Yes.
You have to be able to like squeeze enough that you can stay.
Yes.
And like go down without your arm just coming down. And that's a really hard thing, I think, for a lot of people to get their head around. Yes. To like not just press it and not just collapse under it, but to figure out what that middle thing is where you just stay.
Well, it's the one lift where I tell people all the time you're not using enough weight, because if you can start to move it with your arm, it's not heavy enough. You want something you can't even get moving, that you have to manipulate and get on. Boy, if you can learn it, and you don't have to do a lot of weight on it either. Do work up to half your body weight would do wonders for you. I'm not saying you're going to do 300 pounds. Again, we're not training top level athletes. If I was training top level footballers from Scotland, then yes, we'd be pushing the weight somewhat. It'd be more about what do we need? What's going to be the first 2 or 3 things that get injured on you? All right, let's really shore those up and make those super strong. It's not really about them being stronger than the other team. It's about them being more injury resistant than the other team. Because if your team doesn't get injured, they're going to be able to perform at a higher level more often. Yes,
What are some closing thoughts for the listeners about strength training that you would like to pass on?
Always go for the option that may not be as much weight, but it has a lot of movement to it. Stay with free weights, and yeah, I think that's the main thing. Stay with the free weights because they require more from your body. If machines are for people that need those machines for a specific purpose. If you're a general population, you're not one of those people. That's for high level athletes, unless you have something very specific you're trying to fix. But that can be problematic because then if you isolate too much, it can be too hard to coordinate that into full body lifestyle activities, So it's definitely better to stay with the free weights, learn to use your body. I would say get a book on Maxick and learn muscle control. I think is because it's something you can do standing in line. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it while watching TV. There's really no good excuse not to do muscle control. You have your gym with you wherever you are, right? So I guess those 3 would be big: the free weights, the muscle control, and opt for things that use more movement rather than no weight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll put some links to those books in the show notes for anyone who wants to find them. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about some old school training practices? Mostly on Instagram. So Strongman Archaeology on Instagram, and Daily Motion, videos in Daily Motion as Strongman Archaeology as well. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, lovely listeners, as well, for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please leave a 5-star review. That would be great. If you didn't, you don't have to leave a review. That's fine. I hope everyone has a lovely day. Thank you. Yes.